This is World History 1, Chapter 5, Segment 3. We'll start talking about the Battle of Marathon, which is the First Persian War. The Persian Wars were fought between Greek city-states and Persia. Before the Battle of Marathon, the First Persian War takes place, there's an incident known as the Ionian Revolt that causes the First and then the Second Persian War. Ionia is off the eastern coast, the western coast of Turkey, the Mediterranean Sea. That land was known as Ionia. They were Greek colonies. So people from Athens, Sparta, other city-states, when they became overpopulated, as we talked about earlier in the chapter, groups of people would get on ships and they would go set up a colony. They'd speak the same Greek language, they'd have the same customs and heritage and traditions of that city-state that they came from. They would just be in other places, in this case in Ionia. Well, after a time, Ionia was conquered by the Persians, and the Persians changed some of the systems of government in the colonies and would put a tyrant in charge. And some of these tyrants became corrupt and wanted to break free and make themselves independent Ionia again. So they revolted against Persia. And when they did this, they asked their home city-states for help, troops, money, supplies. And Athens decided to help them because they were almost like family. They were distant relatives of people in Athens, so they sent troops and money across the Mediterranean to help Ionia. The Ionians were able to burn down the Persian capital in Ionia, known as Sardis, and they burnt down temples there. They laid waste to it. However, ultimately, because the Ionians failed to unite together, they were not successful against the Persians. And Darius, the king of the Persians, was able to put down the revolt. And after he put down the revolt, he vowed to punish Athens for helping in the Ionian revolt. So much so that every day before dinner he would have a servant whisper in his ear, remember Athens, remember Ionia. So in 490 BC, Darius sent 25,000 men across the sea by boat. He himself was not in charge, and their job was to land in Greece and take over Athens and burn it to the ground. The Persians didn't land in Athens itself. They landed at a nearby place called Marathon. Marathon's a marshy, open land. It's 26.2 miles away from Athens. When they get off the ships, they're in the marshland, they're huddled close together, and the Athenians are already waiting for them. So the Athenians decide to attack the Persians before they can get all of their troops, and especially their cavalry, off the ships. And when they attack them, they start walking, then they trot, and they run at the Persians. They attack the Persians, who are not ready for battle, and they're able to force the Persians back. Even though the Athenians are severely outnumbered, they're able to attack and defeat the Persians. And the Persians flee the battle. They're trying to get back on their ship, so much so that some of the people that are trying to climb up the walls of the ship have their hands hacked off. And it's a resounding victory. At this point, the Persians begin to sail away, but they're not going back to Persia. Now they're going to try and attack Athens itself by going into the harbor. The entire army of Athens was at Marathon, so they needed to send a runner back to Athens to let the city know, hey, don't give up without a fight. We've won the Battle of Marathon. The rest of the troops are on their way back to protect the city of Athens, so don't give up if you see the Persian ships. So they send Phidippides to do this. When Phidippides reaches Athens, he comes inside, yells Nike, which is victory, and then dies. And then when the Persian ships come, they see the city, and they see that it's not going to be given up, that the gates are closed, and they decide they don't want to fight another battle, and they return home. So this basically just explains that the Athenians had 10,000 there waiting. The Persians, they're also not suited for battle against the Greeks. They have very light armor. They're not trained in phalanx warfare. They're made for fighting on an open plain. Their infantry would hit you from the front, and their cavalry would outflank you from the sides or the rear. So they're not used to fighting shoulder to shoulder, banging into one another in a phalanx. 6,000 Persians died at the Battle of Marathon, and the Athenians only lose 200, and it's because of that difference in fighting style. We already explained this a little bit too. We already said that Athens was defenseless, that's why they sent the runner back. And the reason that the marathon is 26.2 miles is to harken back to the Battle of Marathon and Phidippides, because he ran the 26.2 miles, and then when he got there, he announced victory and then died. So that's why today's marathons are 26.2 miles. Here's a map of the battle. Here you see the Athenians with their allies. What they did is they had almost a U-shaped formation. The Persians charged it in the middle, and they began to beat the Athenians back. Notice that there aren't as many troops in the center as there are on the sides. So when the Persians funnel into this gap, the sides close in on them like a pair of scissors and are able to pin the Persians against one another and able to defeat them, and that's when they rush back to their fleet. So here's Marathon, this is the pathway to Athens, and then here is the coast. And as I said, it was a marshland, so it was difficult for them to get to find their footing. It's very soft ground. Next, we'll briefly talk about Thermopylae and the Battle of Salamis. We're going to be watching videos in class about both these topics, so I'm only briefly going to touch on them now. In 480 BC, Xerxes, who was Darius' son, had vowed to avenge Marathon. Darius had been planning that revenge for a long time, but then he died. His son took up the helm after him. The Greeks were very divided when this happened. So they see this giant army coming towards them from Persia. They see Xerxes is with them. Some of the Greeks want to fight the Persians. Some of them want to fight, or I'm sorry, some of the Greeks fight with the Persians. They join up with them. Some of them want to fight to save Athens. Some say we'll fight the Persians only if they try and attack our homeland. Then the Battle of Thermopylae happens. So 7,000 Greeks, led by 300 Spartans, went up to hold the Thermopylae Pass. And they said, I'm just briefly going to go over this. You're going to get a very in-depth look at the Battle of Thermopylae in class. The Greeks and Spartans are able to hold the pass for 3 days, blocking the Persian assault. They're not able to get through the mountain pass. It's not until a spy betrays the Greeks, tells the Persians where a goat path is around the mountain, that the Greeks begin to become surrounded. The Spartans send the rest of the army away. They stay there as a blocking force to hold up the Persian army for hours, maybe a day, enough to let the rest of the troops flee back to another defensive position. And every Spartan that was there at the battle died. And their sacrifice inspired the Greeks to unite and continue on with the war against Persia. After Thermopylae falls, Athens realizes that they can't hold on to the city, that they'll be overrun. So they abandon the city, they get all their people on the ships and move them out, and only a few people remain behind. The Persians come in, they take Athens, they burn it down to the ground, including the Acropolis. But the citizens of Athens were preserved, as was the Athenian navy. Here we see a map of the Battle of Thermopylae and the movements to Salamis. So here's the Thermopylae Pass, right here. Persians first came in here, and they were blocked by the Greeks. Then they found the mountain pass around, so they attacked from the front while these went around, and then they pinched the Greeks and they killed all the Spartans. Here on this big map we see troop movements and ship movements. So the troops moved in by land while the ships moved in by sea. Here in the Artesian Strait, this was the battle that was taking place. They coincided with Thermopylae. After Thermopylae fell, the Greeks knew, hey, we don't need to hold Artemisium anymore, so they then went to Salamis. Here we see this is a group of Persian ships that tried to go around the island of Euboea to pinch the Greeks in the rear. And this fleet was completely destroyed by the storm, as is said right here. Then, after Thermopylae, the Persians move in here. They take over Athens, and then they wait, and then eventually they go to conquer the rest of Greece, but the Greek forces meet them at Plataea, where the Persian army is defeated. The Persian Navy, meantime, before that, went here to destroy the Greek Navy, and the Battle of Salamis took place. It was a resounding victory for the Greeks. Most of the Persian Navy was destroyed, and after this, Xerxes and part of his army actually had to leave to go back in case Xerxes would be killed or captured. So Themistocles and Salamis. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here, but not too much more. So Athens was burnt to the ground, and the Greek navy then decided to retreat back to Salamis. Salamis is a very narrow strip. The Persians could not surround the Greeks there because they were in a narrow corridor on sea. So when they go to attack, they only have a small front. Greeks are able to match that front, and they're able to defeat the Persians and destroy 1/3 of their fleet. Here is a map of the Battle of Salamis. So here's the Persian fleet here. They're out here. Rather than wait here for the Greeks to attack them, which then they could use their entire fleet almost at once, they decided to attack here in Salamis in the harbor and attack the Greeks. The Greeks are able to hold a relatively small front compared to this large one that they would have had to fight on. So when the Persian ships move in, the Greeks are able to fight them off and have a resounding victory. Mostly because this narrow corridor boxed the ships in. The Persian ships couldn't maneuver, but the Greek ships could because there were less of them. So they were able to decimate the Persian ships. The Battle of Plataea, 479 BC. So the Greek navy had been defeated. The Persian navy had been defeated. Xerxes retreated back with part of the army and the rest of the fleet back to Persia. He left men there and General Mardonius in charge to conquer the rest of Greece. But the Greeks rallied, they united, they fought at the Battle of Plataea, and they destroyed the Persians on land. Then the Delian League, which was a confederation of Greek city-states, forced the Persians back, their entire fleet, the rest of their army, out of Greece back into Persia, and actually take some land from Persia and Ionia. By the 470s, Athens became the leader of the Delian League. Once again, it was a confederation of Greek city-states. They would all pay tribute or taxes, and it was supposed to be for the common defense of Greece, presumably against Persia if they ever tried to move back again. However, by the 470s, Persia was disinterested, didn't want anything to do with Greece anymore. But the Athenians kept the Delian League there. They moved the headquarters to Athens from Delos, and they began to bully other members. They began to take taxes from the Delian League to rebuild Athens, to rebuild the Athenian fleet. And people that didn't pay up would then be pressed and would have to pay or would have the money taken from them. Basically, at this point, Athens now has an empire. It's the head of Greece, and it has several colonies that were Persian on the Ionian coast that are now belong to Athens. Here we have a picture of what warfare might have been like at the Battle of Plataea. You see the phalanx here, you see the Greeks armed head to toe, you see their dory spears, and then you see the Persians with their light armor, if any armor at all. Not really much of a match for the heavy armor and training of the Greeks.